Welcome to the Advocate for Kids podcast. I'm your host, 4Kids President Kevin Enders. Join us on the journey to discover stronger advocacy through nonprofit best practices, life-changing stories, and business strategies that take our mission to the next level. We're here to advocate stronger than ever together. Well, hello and welcome back to the Advocate for Kids podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Enders, and so excited that you decided to join us again, where we're going to be talking about business best practices. We're going to be telling some amazing stories. And today we're going to circle back and talk about nonprofit best practices and how that can apply to your life. And we're certain that today is going to be a fruitful discussion and you'll be blessed and informed about some things that will be beneficial to you because of our guests. Today we have Larry Rein with us, who's the president and CEO of ChildNet. And ChildNet is our lead agency here in Broward and Palm Beach County. And so Larry, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. A pleasure.
Yeah. So gotten to know Larry really well over the last 5 years, but I know you've been in this business for a long time. So I thought it would be really helpful for our listeners just to hear a little bit about your story, how you got involved.
I think it's an interesting story. My background was, I was trained to be a psychologist. I was perhaps the worst psychologist to ever traverse the earth. And so I got back into retail business, which I had grown up in, clothing business, and had a little chain of ladies' sportswear stores in South Florida, from Kendall up to Palm Beach Gardens, and did well and had fun and always thought that something was missing in my life and I should be doing something more. And I deceived myself for a while by writing checks to nonprofit organizations and charities and thought that was the answer. And then I was blessed by having my business go bad.
Wow. That's good.
Not in a terrible way, but the business got tougher and tougher and was not as much fun. And both my partner and I decided to just walk away. He had a master's degree in social work and I had a master's degree in psychology. Wow. And I thought I would give back to the industry, give back to the community.
Yeah.
And so I sent a letter to 32 nonprofit organizations in Broward County, telling them that I was available to be their CEO or executive director. I did not hear from any.
Interesting.
I started getting a little bit morose and somewhat depressed, melancholy, let's say. And nothing was happening. And my wife said to me, you got to do something. You got to go see a professional about this. And there was a woman that we knew who was a psychiatrist, nice practice on Las Olas Boulevard. And I went to talk to her about the profession and how to break into the profession. And she started explaining, you have to get licensed as a clinician and this and that. And I said, how do you go about that? She says, you need to get some hours unsupervised. And outside her office, she had an intern that she was supervising to become licensed. I said, okay, that's great. How much does that pay? And she said, well, we don't pay for that. That's voluntary. So I said, so how do I make a living while I'm doing this? She says, you work for a nonprofit organization. Maybe you do counseling. This young man over here works for Lutheran Services of Florida. I said, okay, that's cool. How much does that pay? She said, well, he makes, I think, $16,000 a year. I said, oh, that's nice.
That's a problem.
I went home, told my wife, I will rot in a certain place before I will ever work for $16,000. That was the weekend of July 4th of 1995. And 6 months later, I took a job with the Agency for Community Treatment Services, ACTS, an organization out of Tampa that does business now in South Florida. They were opening up the Juvenile Assessment Center in Fort Lauderdale, intake place for all the kids that get arrested, all the juvenile justice kids. And they hired me to work the midnight shift as a delinquency case manager from midnight to 8. And I came home all excited that I got the job. My wife says, how much are you making? I said, $16,000 a year. I said, don't worry, though. I'll get a real job during the day. Then my blessings really began. My supervisor quit after 3 weeks. I got her job. And then the program director got fired after 3 months, and I got her job.
Okay.
So that was it. I was the program director at the Juvenile Assessment Center, then called the Juvenile Intervention Facility. And then I just got fortunate and I found my niche. I found my niche, which was organizing people, bringing people together to work. So JIF, Juvenile Assessment Center, was like 8 organizations under one roof.
Okay.
And I was the one that had to coordinate things. And it's sort of like what I do today.
Wow. How interesting. So a good factoid for our listeners is I started my career in retail and actually in women's sportswear, working for a department store a long time ago. But how interesting that we share a background similar, and those businesses did change over time, and God opened up new doors to do different things. So talk to me about the transition from that point to ChildNet's formation and kind of the evolution of community-based care. And for those people that are listening, maybe from different states, Florida is run in a unique way. And I'm going to ask Larry to explain it because he's been here from the beginning, where Florida is a very large state. We were managed by a Department of Children and Families out of Tallahassee. And I know there's a governor at the time, I think it was Jeb Bush, that had this vision to make it more local because these communities across the state all are different and unique. And so this idea of community-based care kind of started to be discussed, I think 1999. And if I'm not mistaken, I think ChildNet was formed around 2003 as this thing unfolded called community-based care. So I'd love to hear kind of how you transitioned from that role you explained into ChildNet as, I think, employee number 2, and maybe tell a little bit of a story about the starting point there.
I'd love to. And I think it's particularly important because now we're 20 some years down the road. It's ChildNet's 20th anniversary, my 20th anniversary with ChildNet on August 1st.
Okay.
And people don't understand how far we have advanced.
Yeah.
Foster care today in the state of Florida, one, sort of leads the nation.
It does.
It really does. And that's not hyperbole. I mean, it really does. And there's really good data to show that. But people in power now, and it's a very political game. You mentioned Governor Bush. The Democrats say it was Governor Childs. It's pretty hilarious. But at any rate, the notion was that the Department of Children and Families, a monolithic bureaucracy operating out of Tallahassee, was doing a dreadful job.
Right.
There were tragedies constantly in Broward County, which I'm very familiar with back then. There were more than 100 children in foster care every day on runaway and sleeping in offices. There were foster homes licensed for 5 that had as many as 12 children in them.
Wow.
There were shelters created by the Department of Children and Families without ever going through the licensing process. It was ripe. It was just not working. And the governors and the legislature had the good idea, and I don't even know really where they got it from, because we were among the first, I believe.
Right.
And to instead of doing it all from Tallahassee, have a model that was then 22 local nonprofit organizations throughout the state that the Department of Children and Families would contract with to operate the local system and create a local system that met the needs and took advantage of the unique resources of that community. That was the model. It's been tremendously successful. Not perfect. We got a ton better work to do. And you and I talk about that a lot.
Yep.
And we'll talk about it more today. But it's light years from where it was. But the people in power today, the legislators today, the administrators at the Department of Children and Families, they don't know what it was like back then. And they have this natural desire to want to rein back in and to centralize and to micromanage. But the model is not about that. The model was about the state giving money to the local organizations, which then subcontract with local nonprofits.
Right.
And we build what we think we need to build.
Yeah.
And that's what we did in Broward. And they did it throughout the state. You know, it's not just about Broward by any stretch.
Yeah, no. And just to inform our listeners about some of the things you talk about, I think when I came to learn about this transition and hear the horror stories back in the 90s about what was going on. And I think Florida, because federally they track outcomes, safety, permanency, and well-being for children in care. Florida was ranked, I think, 48th in outcomes in states. And right now, Florida is ranked number 1 in large states, large populous states in outcomes for children in care. It doesn't mean we can't improve. I think all the leaders across the state, and I serve on a board with Larry called the Florida Coalition for Children, we all believe we can get better because any amount of abuse or any amount of imperfections in the system, we work so hard, and you can tell Larry's a little passionate like myself, to get better, because we do. Larry really does care about every single child that's in our area that needs services. And so we work together, and we do hear about how do we continue to improve, but we do not want to go back. And I heard somebody use this analogy. It's like if somebody takes over the New England Patriots or the Alabama Crimson Tide, they're not going to completely change the system. They're going to find ways to improve it, of course, putting right people in right positions and different things, but let's not abandon what's gotten us so far.
And there's also great flexibility. So my favorite story is the first day ChildNet started. Started operations April 1st of 2003. We opened up Safe Place, right? In Broward.
On April Fool's Day.
Right.
Oh, great.
And we had spent 9 months preparing for that opening, and we made all our plans, all the procedures. The next day, the then CEO said, let's get together, let's see how we did. We sat down, he asked the guy in charge of client services, how'd we do? He says, not well. He says, what do you mean not well? He says, pretty much everything we did was wrong. CEO said, so let's change it. That we spent the next 24 hours redoing everything and made it all work. Tallahassee, you would have had to go back and forth getting approval from every layer and everything. And they probably would have said, nah, we can't do it that way. No, we can't do it that way. Oh, we have to do it this way.
Right.
But instead, we can do it the way we need to do it. And we got to be very careful that we don't lose that. And there's this impetus, and you understand where it's coming from. People come in new. There's been 12 secretaries at the Department of Children and Families in my 20 years at ChildNet. Okay, I'm the third CEO. I'm the second employee. There's this continuity that we have, and we have the experience, and they don't have, and they want to control it, and they want to micromanage it, and we're going to need to fight that.
Yeah. Well, and it's amazing for me to be around someone like Larry and some of the senior executives at 4Kids who have been here 22, 23 years, as we are celebrating our 25th year. So you can see we are here at the beginning of this change, and to capture those stories, even for me as a new CEO who came in 5.5 years ago, to not lose that reference point about the value of community-based care and how far we've come. I'm wondering if you could share, because I'm sure there's going to be people listening from other states that they're not there yet. They're struggling in a system that is centralized, and there is not this local flavor. I mean, as you kind of reflect back on some of the real positives, maybe you could share one or two. Like you just said, flexibility, you can respond a lot quicker. You're not stuck in bureaucracy, or just maybe a story about just understanding the local community. Broward County, where we sit today, is so different than Palm Beach, and Larry manages both through ChildNet. But even the counties are different, and they have a different makeup.
They're tremendously different. Again, the demographics is different. The geography is different.
Yeah.
The resources is different.
Right.
ChildNet was really built out of a community initiative. When we all realized that this was going to happen, this so-called privatization of foster care, you had your choice. Either you fight it or you accept it. There were some very wise community leaders in Broward back in 2001 that said, you know what, it's going to happen. Let's do it the right way. They formed something called the Broward Child Welfare Initiative that eventually actually morphed into ChildNet. The leader, the chair of the Broward Child Welfare Initiative, actually became the first CEO of ChildNet, great man, Peter Ballesteros.
Okay.
And we reached out to the community, and we got money from the United Way and the Community Foundation to bring in a consultant to build a business model and a business plan for what ChildNet or what community-based care in Broward should look like. And that's what evolved. It's a model that's not the same everywhere around the state. We do in Broward the case management ourselves, but everything else we subcontract out. In some places they do that differently. We subcontract out all the foster homes.
Right.
In some places the lead agency will do that themselves and that. So you do what's best. We had 14 great agencies developing foster homes led by 4Kids of Florida, then South Florida. And so I wanted to take advantage of that. And that was my responsibility, was the subcontracts back then. Right. So I said, let's take advantage of everybody and who they know and the neighborhoods they're in and the people they know.
Yeah.
And that's one of the differences.
Yeah, that's good. I was going to ask you, as you've seen ChildNet grow and change, maybe you could talk a little bit about something maybe in the last 5-10 years. I don't know. What has changed? I was thinking along the lines of maybe something that you've seen change in the community, needs that are changing. How have you led ChildNet to innovate and go through a change itself, right? I'm sure it's not the same organization today as it was 20 years ago. Just like For Kids continues to evolve and change in our services and how we approach the marketplace. Is there anything that kind of comes to mind?
Well, there's obviously a lot of things that come to
Yeah.
mind. Some of them are internal. I mean, I'm very committed, which I never was before, to making ChildNet a much stronger organization. And I would give people like you credit for it. People that come in with a bigger business organizational background. You started asking me some questions early on in our relationship, and I'm saying, boy, we don't do that. And we never really thought about that. and we should. So we're trying very much to make ChildNet a really strong organization. Yeah. That includes things like employee engagement, and it's funny, there's another one. So we went out, we got Gallup, and we entered into a 3-year contract. We're in the 3rd year. We're going to renew and do more, where they come in, do the most professional survey of employee engagement you could imagine. And then we develop action plans with them throughout the organization to improve our engagement. When I told Tom Lukasik, For Kids, about it, he said, oh yeah, we've been doing that for years. Just to make the point. So that's one thing. The other thing is, and it's really relevant now, especially relevant this month, because this is National Reunification Month.
Right.
We need to, and we've started to, and it's a struggle, change the culture. And it's not just ChildNet. I think it's locally, quite frankly, that we need to focus on families, keeping families together, and reunifying families and supporting them in ways that we've never done. Regrettably, ChildNet at the beginning, myself included, had an image of families sort of as, the bad abusers. And there's still that sense, a lot of places in both counties.
Right.
And it's understandable. People, and it's for good reasons. People want to save and want to help and keep safe children. Yeah. But we really got to get them with their families. So I think that's something that's in the process of changing, and something that we have to change more. You guys get that.
No, we totally get it. It's interesting. One of the things I've been tasked with as the president and CEO of For Kids by my board of directors is how we evolve. And our mission statement has always been to provide hope for kids in crisis. And the child is at the center, but it's evolving because it's really becoming a family ministry, because the family has to be intact for the child to be healthy, safe, secure, and thriving. And even as we reunify, early on in our career, my wife and I were foster parents. We adopted. We were celebrating adoptions, which we should when a child gets permanency, because we want the child to have permanency, whether that's with their biological family or with an adoptive family. But we started to really feel this need to celebrate reunification. So at our Christmas parties that we hold for our families, or even in the spring, we started to make it a point through our marketing communications and even internal communications and events where our families were that let's celebrate this, because the goal of the foster care system is to reunify children with their families and to provide that bridge. Foster families are just there to provide that safe, loving, secure place while the parents get well and the family gets back intact. So we've seen that change too. And it's just awesome to hear from you that you're feeling and seeing the same thing. And we can be in this work a long time and it continues to evolve and change, but we want to meet the needs and change our communities, right, for the better. So I appreciate that we share that same heart, especially now, as he said, in June, as we celebrate National Reunification Month. We're coming off of May, which is National Foster Care Awareness Month. And so this month we'll be doing the same thing with a lot of our marketing and celebrating where God has used foster families to help unify and reunify children with their families. But then there's relationships that continue for a long time, which is really it really does change a community over time. So I appreciate your heart behind that. Let's talk about a little bit what's going on today, like real world on the ground. Again, Larry and I serve on a board of the Florida Coalition. So we do meet quarterly and we talk about issues across the state and locally. What keeps you up at night? What, regarding the work that we do, because to your point, if someone's looking in from outside, Florida has been very successful, but guys like you and me and our teams, we still want to get better. What is one thing maybe that you could talk about as a current challenge that you're really saying to your team, we've got to get better at this?
There's two things. The override, but they go together. The overriding thing is we need to recognize that we are not perfect. We need to recognize that though we've done good work, we need to do much better work. Yeah. We need to not be defensive about when anybody points out our flaws or shortcomings, we need to look at them honestly. And that is a gigantic struggle. People's natural mindset, myself included, is to get defensive
Right.
when criticized and to say, oh no, we do great, great stuff. We do, but we're not perfect, and we've got a long way to go in some areas. So it's going to take people to really change their mindset and be open to admitting that we're not doing the best job and working towards doing it, and doing that in a meaningful way. And then the particular area within that, for me, I think the younger kids in foster care, we place a child in a foster home with 4 kids or kids in distress or pretty much anybody, and we are so confident that they are going to get an amazing level and quality of care and love. I don't feel so good about the teenagers. We have not figured out how to serve the teenagers that are in foster care that have any of us that have had teenagers know that they're a challenge. Imagine these kids who have been sufficiently abused, abandoned, and neglected to come into the foster care system. They likely are coming from environments where crime and violence is either the norm or certainly very prevalent. Juvenile justice records, and people not wanting, foster parents reluctant, understandably, their own parents reluctant to care for them. We've had, in the first 9 months of the current fiscal year in Broward County, 36 teenagers enter foster care because their caregiver would no longer care for them because of the child's behavior, be it their delinquency, their mental health, their substance abuse, or them just being angry, aggressive, rude, non-compliant. I think it's a sin. I think that this community needs to do much better, and we have the resources, and we've invested resources, but maybe they're not really meeting the need, certainly for those 36 families. Yeah. So I think that's a place where we really got to look at quality. We got to, I hate to use the word think out of the box, because when you say that, you're not thinking out of the box, but we need to try new and different things, and we need to take chances, it's very difficult. This business is tough, and you're going to have failures, and you're going to have bad incidents because of just the arena that you're in. But we got to figure out a way to overcome our fears about that and take the chances.
Yeah. See, that's one of the things I love about Larry is there's thousands of kids in care, but his heart's beating for those 36 teens that he wants to figure out how to do it better. And I just so appreciate that about you, Larry. And when I'm on these calls with people across the state and we're talking about these big strategic issues, Larry is the only CEO, I think, in the state. And I want to admire you for that. Like, you bring it back to what we do, because we can get caught up in a lot of the bureaucratic mumbo jumbo of the day and the politics or the power plays. I'm personally thankful that God planted me here to work along someone like you that cares about like the child. Like, how do we, as a community too, there's millions of people in South Florida, and it breaks my heart that there's 36 is not a lot. It's like, but I know they're challenging.
Lost lives.
Right? There's 36 kids that don't have somebody to say you care or you matter, and God has a plan for your life, and there's a future and a hope for you. We like to quote Jeremiah 29:11 from the Old Testament. Like, we believe that. And even through the challenges, you said it yourself, we all have gone through challenges in our life of different degrees. But when you persevere and you have somebody, there's this quote by this kid, Josh Shipp, I think you've probably heard it before, that every child in foster care is one caring adult away from success. One caring adult. So we're reaching out to you guys in Broward County. We need 36 or 72, if you're a couple, caring adults that can say yes to take a teenager. Like, that to me is solvable. It's not like this is an unsolvable crisis. And if you want to learn more and find out, reach out to 4Kids at 4kids.us or ChildNet and .us and get connected, right? And get connected in a way where you can help. You can help, because these kids are our future, right? We're getting older, and it really matters to us that we leave this place better than we found it. And man, just those 36 children, we're going to advocate for those today. And I share that heart across the state. There is definitely a heartbeat for people and children of all ages, right? That's another thing that's beautiful about the system. Whether you're an infant, a sibling group, teenagers, or kids that age out. We have great programs we've been doing together with ChildNet for now over 18 years of kids are aging out of the system. And there's just a great community of people that seem to have a certain care and a certain heart for each area. So I'm just curious, as we kind of get to the end of our time together, if there's any words of wisdom or anything you might think to share with, again, people that are listening, maybe in the state of Florida, maybe they're listening from outside the state of Florida. And I just want to give you an opportunity to just anything else that is on your heart as you kind of prepared for today that you think would be valuable for someone to hear, or give them some sort of direction on, okay, what do I do now? Or what would your advice be? Maybe it's an organization, could be an organization, could be an individual.
Well, I've said a lot, and I'm inclined to just sort of summarize. I think there's a couple of things that we need to do. Certainly, people need to get involved in any way they can, and you can take that in small steps. That can be a donation to 4Kids or to ChildNet, or you can volunteer, you can foster, you can mentor, and get your feet wet and get involved, or be supportive in other ways. This is a very big political game, and we always need support from people of influence to be sure that we can preserve this model. And so again, my big things are, we need to really get people to understand how successful the model of community-based care is, that we need to preserve it, strengthen it, move it forward. And we need to move it forward by recognizing that we always need to do more and do better for our abused, abandoned, and neglected children. Think about it. Think about what they've been through. Forget return on investment. Forget whether or not you're meeting your budget. Forget about the liability and the risk. We need to do the most and the best that we can for these children and their families.
Yeah. Wow. That's awesome. Again, a lot of passion in Larry's voice. And it's just been great, again, to spend time with you and to share your heart and some of the things that we're seeing happening here in South Florida with, again, our state, our nation, and the world. There's some great work being done down here. Makes me think of even the preventative work that we've launched. We didn't talk about all the work we've done on the front end to try to help preserve families, where they're at, try to make sure they have the services that they need as a community. And we've partnered with ChildNet and other organizations with the launch of Care Portal in fall of 2020. And we've seen tremendous success. Over 1,000 children already have been helped. Their families have been preserved so that they don't get removed from their families. And again, it takes a village. It takes a community of people. So how do we continue to move upstream and help those families stay intact so that then we don't have to try to put them back together again, is really something that we've seen a tremendous amount of progress on. And then, of course, when kids are in care and families are in care, how do we provide the families, the volunteers, the therapeutic services that are really important to help, again, children and families navigate trauma and get to their desired destination of why God created them.
And I spent a lot of time talking about what we need to do going forward, but Kevin hit on something here. When we're talking about the prevention, and we talked early about how good we've done.
Yeah.
Number of kids in foster care in Broward County today is a third of what it was 20 years ago. There used to be 4,000 kids. There's now 1,600.
Right.
Imagine how they used to linger in the system for 60 months at a time.
Right.
Now their length of stay is 12 months.
Right.
The advances are great. So don't get me wrong. And people need to just jump on and make it even better.
Yeah. Amen. Amen. Well, again, I just can't thank Larry enough for coming and sharing just his heart, his passion, some of his insight today. So thank you, my friend.
Thank you.
More work ahead for us. Obviously, you have our commitment to continue to work alongside ChildNet to try to make this a better place to live and to raise a family and to enjoy community. And so again, I told you this was going to be a great session. And I think it was. And I encourage you, if you have questions, to reach out to 4Kids. You can find us on the World Wide Web at 4kids.us. That's the number 4kids.us, or childnet.us as well. We'd be happy to try to help you to get involved, get more involved, answer any questions that you might have. So until next time, we'll see you on the Advocate for Kids podcast in the future. Thanks again, Larry.
Thank you. My pleasure.